You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Great to be with you again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Always free and available on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. And today's episode brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use our code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off of your first purchase. With the only Chris Level, I'm Casey Cowan, back for a Locked On Texas Tech special edition as we gaze across the field to the opposing sideline once again. And today we're talking Cyclones of Iowa State. And it's great to be joined by Bill Sills of Cyclone Report, part of the Rivals Network. Bill, appreciate a bit of your time here today. And as we begin the conversation, just curious, following another season for Matt Campbell and the Cyclones, what's the big storyline this offseason there in Ames, as you had some peaks, you had some valleys, but you had a pretty strong finish to the year. So what's the general conversation been about as we get ready for 2024?
I think just a kind of a contrast in how this year's a lot different than last year as far as the experience coming back. I believe that I've seen some numbers out there, 85, 86% of their production coming back from a year ago. I think easily first in the Power 4 ranks, and I think maybe number 2 overall. But I think that's going to allow them to get off to a better start. A lot of people were writing this team off in 2023 after they start 1-2. They lose to Iowa. Seems like they lose to Iowa every year, but they lose that game at home, and then they go on the road and lose to Ohio, and the offense was a mess. They had a first-year starting quarterback. They didn't think it was going to be Rocco Beck going into last offseason, and they had, all the gambling stuff going on, and Rocco ascends to number 1. So I think they kind of handled him with kid gloves, coming right out of the gate. Didn't really open the offense up a whole lot, and they had a lot of uncertainty on the defensive side of the ball as well. The defensive line, they never really replaced Will McDonald, who was a pick of the New York Jets. I had a lot of uncertainty there. The pass rush, even at the end of the year, wasn't really the levels it had been the years before. So both sides of the ball, I think, coming out of the chutes, that they started slow, didn't finish real well. They lost to Memphis in the Liberty Bowl, but I think the last probably 2/3 of the season, they really hit their stride. Beat Oklahoma State. That was a nice win for them at home to kind of get themselves rolling in Big 12 play. So, and then you move ahead to this year, and a lot of that production's back. So there's really no excuse, I think, this year for a slow start. Slow Septembers have kind of been the theme for a lot of these Matt Campbell coach teams, and they kind of hit their stride in October. But really, there's no excuse for that to happen this year with so much production coming back. They're going to be able to open things up right away. That's certainly a big storyline. Rocco Becht, again, quarterback, a lot of experience this year or last year. He's back this year, and they've got 2 of the top returning wide receivers, really, I think, in the Big 12, and Jaden Higgins. He's getting kind of more of the preseason pub than Jalen Noel, but both of those guys are foundational pieces there, and they saw a lot out of Abu Sama his true freshman year, and he's back now as a sophomore. So a lot of skill players. Maybe as we get into this, I'm not sure how much depth you guys wanted to get into, but we could probably touch on the offensive line as well. That's going to be, as it is for every team out there, I think that's going to allow this Iowa State team full of returning skill players to kind of take things to another level. But, this was a group that really didn't perform all that well last season. The whole group is back, but it was a group that didn't really perform too well, especially in the run blocking phase.
Man, you a lot of similarities there between Iowa State and the Red Raiders. Questionable offensive line last year, the slow start party. We were invited to that one as well last couple of years. Strong finish. The Red Raiders also the same. I'm fascinated by the gambling scenario, and I think it's one of Matt Campbell's maybe best coaching jobs. the circus that was, what was it, 7 players or starters or significant players that were removed from the team, including the starting quarterback. All this talk and distraction, and yet they were able to overcome it, get to a bowl game and all those things. Speak to that whole dynamic, and where does all that stand? Are any of those are all those players just gone? Were they allowed back? I mean, just take me through the dynamic of what a goofy situation that was, and really a shame. From the outside in.
Yeah, and it was really something that I think for the most part was exclusive to the state of Iowa. They had a rogue agent that kind of initiated that whole thing. Iowa, even football and wrestling. Iowa State football, wrestling, those were kind of the 2 sports that were hit the most. And Hunter Deckers at quarterback was, they expected him to come in and be a second-year starter in 2023. That didn't happen. He's now, believe it or not, he's going to play over at Iowa Western. He's gone the JUCO route and trying to kind of rehab his image or whatever, and then maybe come out and be a professional in the CFL. But enough on him. Rocco Becht comes in, and now I thought he acquitted himself well. The offensive line, for all of its warts, they did do a good job of keeping him on his feet. That was one of the positives. So he did have some time to get the ball around to the wide receiver group that he had. On the defensive side of the ball, Isaiah Lee was one of them that was an interior guy that they lost him, a starter. So they had to replace him kind of on the fly. So I talked about the defensive line, and Will McDonald was gone. And then all of a sudden you lose Isaiah Lee. So they run that 3-man front, that 3-3-5. So now you're talking 2 of the 3 you're without. You have to replace one of those on the fly. So at times last season, that defensive line was nowhere near the level that it had played in the past. So it hit Iowa State on both sides of the ball. I think, one thing that did come out of that, as far as the team, I believe the chemistry was strengthened, and Iowa State kind of got back to that us against the world mentality. And that's really Iowa State. That's where, under Matt Campbell, they've kind of performed at their best when nobody's really expected anything of them. They had a couple of those years that, they went out and they won the Fiesta Bowl that one year, beat Oregon. They came back, everybody picked, they were supposed to be world beaters in 2021 and favorites to, be in the conference championship game. And they went 7-6. So now Iowa State's kind of back to that, spot that they like to be with Matt Campbell. I think picked to finish 6th, I believe, in the Big 12 this year. And I guess that's probably about right. But I think there's a lot of people in the buildings up there at Iowa State that may be offended at that 6th place prediction. They're looking for a lot bigger things this year.
Well, we were kind of curious about that. Some viewing them as a dark horse contender, possibly in the Big 12 conference. And it sounds like in part you sort of answered the question as to whether or not they maybe weren't getting enough preseason pub, given what they were able to turn last year into. And you find this guy at the quarterback spot that was so good. And then you have already pointed to, the pass catchers, what a group they've got going there. So do you think that, you could find Iowa State maybe inserting themselves into a contender kind of category? And if they're able to do so, what's really going to have to be successful for them, you think, to make that happen? First, today's episode brought to you by Gametime. Never sweat buying tickets to your favorite events again with Gametime. It's always a breeze using the Gametime app, where you're going to find the best last-minute deals. And I love being able to scout out a view from any seat before pulling the trigger. And of course, it's always at the lowest price, guaranteed. Gametime has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event and even an hour after it begins, which means you can finish off that last beer at the tailgate at your own pace, because Gametime is the place to find last-minute seats to any event. They give you the fastest and easiest way to buy tickets, but not just fast and easy, also secure and simple to use. So right now, download the Gametime app and create an account and use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem our promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today for last-minute tickets at the lowest price, guaranteed. Today's episode brought to you by Factor. Fuel up this summer with Factor's no prep, no mess meals and meet all of your wellness goals thanks to the menu of chef-crafted options like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, even keto. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are dietitian approved and ready to eat in only 2 minutes. So no matter how busy you are, you'll always have time to enjoy nutritious, great tasting meals. What are you waiting for? Make today the day you kickstart a new healthy routine. With 35 different meals and more than 60 add-ons to choose from every week, you're going to always have new flavors to explore. From breakfast to dessert, you can stay fueled with easy, nutritious options. So go ahead and treat yourself to restaurant quality meals that feature premium ingredients like filet mignon, shrimp, blackened salmon, and much, much more, all while keeping kitchen time to a minimum since Factor meals are ready in only 2 minutes. No shopping, prepping, cooking, or cleaning up. So head to factormeals.com/lockedoncollege50 and use our code lockedoncollege50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month. That's code lockedoncollege50 at factormeals.com/lockedoncollege50 for 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month while your subscription is active with Factor. So, do you think that you could find Iowa State maybe inserting themselves into a contender kind of category, and if they're able to do so, what's really going to have to be successful for them, you think, to make that happen?
Well, again, I think it goes back to that offensive line taking the next step. They've got all 5 guys that started last year are back. Jared Hufford's that super senior 6th-year guy using the COVID year this year. He's moving inside from guard to center. He's going to take over there. So they've got great leadership. As far as the offensive side of the ball, I think that I talk to these recruits and stuff. One of the big things on my site, obviously, Chris, recruiting coverage, and a lot of the offensive recruits that I talk about how Iowa State, the coaches are telling me this, they run this air raid and they're, this and that. And it kind of cracks me up because we saw what Abu Sama did against Kansas State last year in that game down there in the snow. He scored 4 touchdowns. He had some big games. So I think before, I don't know that they got a lot of skill players back, but I'm not sure you can really call it air raid by any means. They're going to be, as long as Matt's there, it's going to be pretty balanced. But they've got great skill players, though, on both sides of the ball. Offense, I mentioned those wide receivers. Ben Bramer's another one, the tight end. He's when he was in last year, he was a true freshman play, and when he was in, they knew it was going to be a passing play because he was like 220 pounds. He's not going to go in there and block, but this year he's like 240, 245. So he's another one. I think he's going to be that next Iowa State tight end playing in the NFL like Charlie Kohler. So tons of pieces, and we'll see how the offensive line comes together to allow them to utilize those guys effectively.
Bill, one of the, Campbell is one, had winning seasons 6 of the last 7 years, was loved up there, probably was afraid he was going to leave, and now he shot away from that and he stayed and all those things. One of the criticisms in recent years for them, and it's not necessarily for him, but just the program in general, is that I think that I'm right here. I think they've lost 13 out of their last 16 one-score games. What is the so if they dramatically fix that, they could end up in Arlington if they start winning all the close ones. Why have they lost so many close ones, or what would be your thought? And they have a new kicker. There's just but just kind of take me through the dynamic of like in so many close games and can't really get over the hump in a lot of those.
Well, that's really been kind of the secret to when they've had success really in 2020, 2021. There were a lot of those games that they won, really. This is a team that they play a lot of those close one-score games, and when they're at their best, when they're going to the Big 12 championship game, when they're winning the Fiesta Bowl, they're close games that they're winning. So I think that's they've got to just turn that around, really. I don't see things really playing out any differently this year. There's still going to be a lot of close games, I believe, that they play, and that's just kind of how the coaching style is, the type of offense that they run. They're going to be in games like that. That's not going to change. So really, it's just coming out. And you mentioned the kicker. That's a good subject as well. Kyle Conradi comes in as a walk-on. They loved what they had in Chase Contreras. That they got, the Nebraska transfer. He was a savior last year from what they had the year before when they had a true freshman out there in Jace Gilbert. So the kicking situation, I still think that's in good hands. They've got a good punter with Tyler Perkins. They can play field position with you if they need to, and they've got a good defense coming back. So I think all that leads me to believe maybe some of those closer losses turn into closer wins this year.
I'm glad you mentioned the defense because I wanted to get to that side of the football. And maybe if you're considering a strength for the team overall, maybe more balanced than I'm anticipating. But with all the experience you've got returning on the defensive side, is it fair to say that would be considered a strength? Is it going to be more balanced? And within that defense itself, where do you feel like success rests as far as the strength of the defense?
Well, they've got to get back to pressuring the quarterback. They had Will McDonald went to the Jets. Jaquan Bailey was a name before him. Jaquan was actually one of those all-time Big 12 leaders in sacks. I think the Texas Tech guy and McDonald are tied now, I think, 1A, 1B as far as all-time sack leaders in the Big 12. So there was a lot to replace there. I think they've got some guys who were young a year ago. Ikena Ezeagu, pronounce that one right. Samuel Sameh, those are two younger guys, I think, that are stepping in. They're a lot bigger, more physical than they were, and that quick twitch that you like out of that Leo defensive end that Iowa State utilizes. I had some potential there, and in Big 12 media days, I wasn't sure. Did you go down there, Chris? Were you down?
No, I wasn't able to make it. No, sir.
One of the big things out of that was Iowa State playing a little more in the 4-man front on defense, and at 3-3-5, that's kind of where it's been for Iowa State over the last several years. But I don't know, maybe if they're kind of adapting with the times. One of the reasons why they went to the 3-3-5 in the first place were those air raid teams that they had in the Big 12 when Campbell first got to Iowa State. So maybe they're changing with the times, maybe with the personnel a little bit, but they've got good anchors on the inside at defensive line with Dominic Orange, J.R. Singleton, and I mentioned some of those pass rushers. Tyler Onyedem, a Texas kid that's worked his way up through the ranks at Iowa State. So I think they can play more 4-man front this year. If there's any spot maybe on defense where there's some uncertainty, it's linebacker. So they would go to a 4-2-5 there. And they're always going to play with those 3 safeties. They've got the 3 safeties. All 3 of those starters are back. Jeremiah Cooper, one of the anchors there, El Paso kid. He was getting offered big money to go play for Texas this year. So I'm sure you guys know what that's all about. But Cooper's back, an all Big 12 caliber guy. So I think certainly defense, nobody talks about it with all the skill players on offense coming back, the quarterback and Rocco Becht, but the defense is very formidable again this year under John Haycock.
Bill, the last thing I have for you is just talking some schedule with you. You know, we've as you look at each team, it's almost like who do they not have to play versus who they are playing, and I'm just curious, kind of just the schedule, how it lays out. It looks pretty, I don't know, maneuverable on paper. Sometimes it doesn't work out that way, but when you're missing, after all the skill that Colorado has, you don't play Arizona, you don't play TCU, you don't play Oklahoma State, But take me through the schedule in your view and kind of how that lays out for Matt Campbell Cyclones.
Well, it's kind of a shame that they don't play Oklahoma State. Those have been some of the best games, Big 12 in general, over the last few years. Those have been some instant classics, and it's a shame they're not on the schedule anymore. But I think the way it sets up, I mentioned no excuses for a slow start, and with personnel and with schedule. I think really the way it lays out, there's no excuse for a slow start. They'll have Iowa on the road this year in week 2. But really, outside of that, I think you're looking a good chance this team goes at least 2-1, maybe 3-0 in the non-conference, and then you go into Big 12 play, and they've got the road trip to Houston to get started. But then games at home against Baylor, at West Virginia, home against UCF. So I really think on paper this sets up for a team the first half of the year to really get off to a tremendous start. One thing outside of the road trip to Utah is I think a lot of the difficult teams on the schedule this year are in Ames. Texas Tech in Ames the first Saturday in November. Those have been games between those two teams as well, I think have been instant classics over the last few matchups. And then they close at home against Kansas State. So certainly I think it lays out pretty well, and there's a reason why I think Iowa State is one of kind of those 4, maybe 5 teams that are being talked about to play in the Big 12 championship game in December.
First, today's episode brought to you by eBay Motors. And eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and keep that ride or die ride on the road, or elevate your car's game to the next level of performance. Superchargers, exhaust kits, LED headlights, roof racks, and accessories of all kinds to fit your style. Whether it's power, speed, or design you're into, eBay Motors has you covered with over 122 million parts to perfectly fit what you need. Just head over to ebay.com/motors now, where you'll always find exactly what you're looking for, and at no risk because of eBay's guaranteed fit. Your part is guaranteed to fit just right every time, or your money back, keeping you burning rubber and not burning cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to keep your ride or die on the road and moving your life forward at ebay.com/motors. eBay guaranteed fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions do apply. First Saturday in November, do you have any ability to cook up a 78 to 82 degree day for my guy Chris Level, who will be roaming the sideline? I think he was freezing some baguettes off last time he was up there, right, Chris?
Yeah, the last time I was there, that last game of the regular season, or close to it, 2 years ago in 22, it was 7 p.m. kick. I think, the temperature was like 0 or 2 degrees. I ranked that night 0 stars.
You never know what you're going to get in November in Ames, Iowa. Everybody was talking about how last season they get Texas up in Ames, and I think it was like the 3rd week in November, and everybody thought maybe they were given Texas the middle finger on the way out. Sending them to Ames at that point in November, and then they come up there and it's like 60 degrees.
Right.
In November. So right. But you never know what you're going to get really.
Sign me up for one of those days then. I'll take that. I'll sign up right now. Yeah, that's right.
One more before we let you go, Bill, and appreciate your time. Find his work at cyclonereport.com. Again, part of the Rivals Network. On the subject of scheduling, Kansas State to wrap it up this time around, but then it's Dublin, Ireland for Farmageddon. I know from far away, this is a series I really like for the Big 12 Conference. And if I'm not mistaken, that will be a non-conference ball game in Dublin. Correct me if I'm wrong, but how important is that series to folks in Ames, or do you think in Manhattan? Because it seems like a lot of fun to us from the outside looking in. It's got a cool name, though unofficial. But is that one that carries some heat with it between the two fan bases?
Yeah, I think so. And all reports are that both fan bases are going to be pretty well represented over there too, I think. And these have been some great matchups on the field in recent years. Last year in the snow, the images from that were pretty memorable down in Manhattan. It wasn't even in Ames. It was in Manhattan, Kansas in November. So And really, I think it's such a rivalry between these two schools, and it extends beyond the football field into recruiting. The Matt Campbell, Chris Kleiman, those are two that go right at it on the recruiting trail so many times. And they want to win bad on the field for recruiting and even in basketball. So these two fan bases, big rivalries in all sports, and it's going to be fun over in Ireland as they get started in 2025.
And that is a non-conference game? Is
that
right?
I think it's going to be a conference game, actually.
Okay.
So it's going to be odd as far as the scheduling goes, as it is for all these teams that open with the conference game to get started. So they'll get right into non-conference play after that. And I think, maybe there will be even one or maybe even two buys before they get restarted in conference play after the non-con.
Gotcha.
Football hotbed, Dublin, Ireland.
Yeah.
Right. Well, how did the fan base react to that? Because just personal opinion, I like conference games on campuses. So how did the fan base kind of react to taking such a fun game and an important rivalry to Ireland? What was the response like?
Well, I think with Iowa State fans, it was pretty positive because it's not really hurting their bottom line. This was a Kansas State home game.
Right.
If they're losing, it's going over to Ireland now. So I think Iowa State fans are ecstatic about that. It's probably going to be a little more neutral of a crowd than it would have been down in Manhattan anyway. So sure. I think it's very, very favorable on Iowa State's behalf. And, the AD, the head coach have gone over there on their little tour and the social media blitz that followed that. So a lot of excitement about that game.
Gotcha. Okay, man. Well, we appreciate the insight. Thanks again for the time, and hope we can do it again down the road. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thanks, Casey, Chris. Appreciate talking to you guys and giving you a few minutes here.
60 degrees in early November, Bill.
Don't forget
I'm counting on it, man.
Okay.
Don't let me down.
Well, you know where my press row seat is, so you can.
Yeah, he ain't worried about that. He ain't worried about you down there.
That's right.
All right. He's Bill Sills of Cyclone Report, cyclonereport.com. Find him on Twitter at William Sills. Cyclone Report, part of the Rivals Network. It's Tech in Iowa State. Not too far from Ames. For Bill and Chris, I'm Casey. Thank you guys for being out there. As always, get subscribed on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts so you never miss an episode. Appreciate your time and hope to see you back for the next round on Locked On Texas Tech.